It has been a day like no other in the Netherlands when the first coffins containing remains of the victims of the downing of MH17 were brought to Eindhoven in a respectful and moving ceremony. It was in stark contrast to the undignified and neglectful way the bodies have been treated at the site of the crash. Tonight, Newsnight has an exclusive interview with the leader of the pro-Russian separatist movement in the region who says he's not to blame for leaving the bodies where they fell.
Мы хотели это сделать с самого начала, но мы испытывали чрезвычайно жесткое давление со стороны представителей ОБСЕ, который говорил: я представитель 57 стран, не смейте трогать тела погибших. Ни в коем случае, иначе все 57 стран, входящих в ОБСЕ.
United in grief, powerful and moving testimonies from the widows of the conflict in Afghanistan.
I just felt as a mum, this was the time I couldn't do anything to help them. I couldn't make it better.
And welcome to the weird and wonderful world of the new master of the Queen's music. Judith Weir joins us in the Newsnight studio. Good evening. Today, the first bodies of the 298 people killed on flight MH17 arrived in the Netherlands, almost a week after the Malaysian airliner was shot down over Ukraine. Two planes brought 40 identical coffins to Eindhoven Airport, where the King and Queen of the Netherlands joined 1,000 relatives of the dead to watch as they were carried to hearses in a ceremony designed to give the victims back their dignity. Well, the scenes in Eindhoven were in marked contrast to the scattered chaos of the fields in eastern Ukraine, where debris and indeed some remains still lie open to the elements. Joining me live now from Donetsk, in the heart of the rebel-held region, is our correspondent Gabriel Gatehouse. Gabriel, first of all, before we talk a bit about that interview you've done with Alexander Borodai, the rebel commander, can you tell us about the two planes that were down, the two military planes?
Yes, Kirsty, two Ukrainian military planes came down over a place called Mogila. That's about 35 kilometers or so south of the MH17 crash site. It's a high piece of ground with one of those huge Soviet monuments on it. It's a place that's held by the rebels, but it's been the focus of a lot of intense fighting over the past few weeks. We don't know exactly what brought those two airplanes down. The Ukrainian government is saying they thought at least one was a shoulder-held surface-to-air missile, but suffice it to say that the Ukrainians are, the rebels rather, are still using surface-to-air missiles to bring down planes, although albeit that these will have been flying considerably lower than the Malaysian Airlines jet.
Now, moving on to this interview that you've done with Alexander Borodai, the rebel leader, what has he had to say?
Yes, well, I mean, he denies that his men were involved in that. He is the man who's risen through a number of power struggles inside the separatist movement to the top of the Donbass rebels. He's the prime minister, that's what he calls himself, of the Donetsk People's Republic, but he is also a man under pressure. He's accused by the West of involvement in bringing down that Malaysian Airlines plane. He's further accused of allowing his men to tamper with the evidence at the crash site and neglect the bodies of the dead in the scorching summer heat. He's also under pressure militarily from the Ukrainian government. He is a Russian. He's had a very mysterious past. He's reputed to have had a role in at least two post-Soviet conflicts in Transnistria and Chechnya. He certainly had a role in the annexation of Crimea earlier this year. He's persistently denied allegations that he is a Russian spy. He says he's a volunteer, a concerned Muscovite coming here to help the people of Donbass fight what they see as an illegitimate government in Kiev. Kiev, though, says he's a spy, and as you'll see in the interview we recorded with him, he denies that, but not altogether convincingly. It's late in the afternoon when we get a call from rebel headquarters. Their leader will see us now. Filming in these corridors is usually strictly forbidden, but Alexander Borodai, the Prime Minister of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic, seen here in the blue denim jacket, talks of an information war. He wants to tell us his side of the story, but time is short. Donetsk is under daily bombardment. As you can see, these people are on a war footing, and even in here, things are quite tense. The rebels continue to deny any involvement in the downing of MH17, but the evidence is mounting. Mr. Borodai's men are accused of tampering with evidence at the crash site. Barack Obama, no less, has accused them of trying to hide the truth.
Ну, это довольно наглая клевета, если честно, да? То есть я не хочу предъявлять такие обвинения господину Обаме непосредственно, поскольку понимаю, что у него просто, скорее всего, отсутствует полноценная информация об этом вопросе. Он просто питается тем, что генерирует украинская пропагандистская машина.
Тем не менее, несколько дней не было доступа международным инспекторам.
Это ложь.
Ну, не было доступа.
Как не было доступа, извините. Мы звали международных экспертов.
Почему они не
ждали, когда они приедут. Потому что им чинила всяческие препоны киевская страна. Она совершенно очевидно не хотела, чтобы хоть кто-то приехал. Я через любые возможные каналы, я лично, все остальные члены правительства призывали, настаивали, чуть ли не вопили на представителей международных организаций, кричали, что давайте быстрее, скорее привозите, черт возьми, своих экспертов. Почему вы их не привозите?
Боялись, может быть?
Может быть, боялись, но это значит, что их запугивала киевская страна, потому что мы со своей стороны сразу объявили о том, что мы не просто готовы, мы предоставляем все возможные гарантии безопасности. Ну, очевидно, когда нас стали спрашивать, а это гарантии стопроцентные, ну как в воюющей стране могут быть стопроцентные гарантии безопасности? Ну, это абсурд. Вы же сами понимаете.
For 3 days after the crash, the remains of the dead passengers lay strewn across a vast area. The rebels have been accused of neglect, of allowing the bodies to decompose in the summer heat, but Mr. Borodai strongly rejects that accusation.
Да мы хотели это сделать с самого начала, но мы испытывали чрезвычайно жесткое давление со стороны представителей ОБСЕ, который говорил вам, я представитель 57 стран, не смейте трогать тела погибших. Ни в коем случае, иначе все 57 стран, входящих в ОБСЕ, то-то и то-то вам сделают. Это ужасно, не трогайте, должны приехать эксперты. Ну мы вот ждем день, мы ждем второй день, мы ждем третий день. Блин, ни одного эксперта. Мы говорим, где же вы, дорогие эксперты, где же вы, где же это мировое сообщество, почему оно не едет? Оно не едет, оно все в Киеве сидит. Ну, дальше уже, простите, держать тела на открытом воздухе при 30-градусной жаре, ну это просто вообще абсурд, это бесчеловечно. Да? Эта ситуация, простите, из просто фильма ужасов, на самом деле.
Despite the downing of 2 Ukrainian military aircraft today, the rebels are under pressure. They've been forced to pull back from several key strongholds in recent weeks. They still control significant swathes of territory, but the Ukrainian operation to try to dislodge them has continued despite the presence of international experts in what is an active war zone.
Да, действительно, мы оставили ряд городов. Это вынужденное действительно отступление, но это тактическое отступление, которое нам позволяет несколько свернуть линию фронта и сконцентрировать силы. Да, мы честно признаем, наши силы по сравнению с силами отмобилизованной украинской армии, к которой еще присоединилось огромное количество наемников из самых разных стран.
Но вы тоже получаете из других стран оружие и наемники?
Нет, мы получаем трофейную технику, я вас уверяю.
Трофейную?
Да, и в большом количестве. Трофейная техника нам всегда достается. Трофей — это значит то, что мы забираем у врагов. Дело в том, что здесь были военные украинские базы, или армейских, или внутренних войск. И, соответственно, тогда, когда эти базы сдавались, они переходили в наши руки, и нам доставались, соответственно, склады вооружения, склады бронетехники. Ну и все прочее.
21.
Нет, БУК нам не достался. Ну, не было БУКов здесь, на этой территории.
А эти фотографии,
На нашем вооружении.
БУК, которые якобы в Торезе, фотографии якобы возле Снежном.
В городе
Откуда
Снежном.
Да. Откуда эти фотографии?
Я не знаю, откуда эти фотографии. Вы же говорите о фотографиях и об информационной войне. Вы же прекрасно понимаете, что фотографии являются плодами, ну, я не буду говорить программу Photoshop, да, а может быть какой-то более техничной работы.
Ну, фальшировка.
Конечно, фейк.
Можно спросить про Россию. Вы получаете поддержку от России? Достаточно?
Мы получаем поддержку от русского народа. Да? Мы получаем
Ну,
поддержку от всего русского народа.
Ну, и от
К нам будут добровольцы. Собственно, я и есть тоже поддержка от русского народа. Поддержка Донбасса от русского народа. Я напоминаю, я вообще-то москвич. Я русский гражданин России и житель города Москвы. Я не дончанин, ни в коем случае. Я сюда приехал как доброволец. Ну, просто так получилось, что вместо того, чтобы сидеть с автоматом или винтовкой в окопе, я сейчас нахожусь там в кресле премьер-министра. Ну, судьба.
Gabriel Gatehouse there with Alexander Borodai, and a spokesman for the OSCE has denied telling Donetsk rebels not to move the bodies at the crash site. Well, now I'm joined by our investigations correspondent Nick Hopkins. Nick, first of all, what do you think Whitehall will make of that interview?
Well, I think they'll find it barely credible. And certainly from what I've been told, GCHQ itself has managed to intercept conversations from the crash site in which they've overheard people talking about tampering with the evidence. They've overheard people talking about providing evidence to support alternative theories, and there's even been chatter about whether other plane parts could be scattered at the site, obviously to try and provide a smokescreen. Separately to that, I've been told that Western satellites have managed to identify the precise location and moment that the missile was fired. They've managed to do this through heat signature. When a missile goes up, it generates a huge amount of heat, and they have technologies that allow them to identify precisely where this came from. So in the West, they feel that they have a compelling intelligence picture now, and they also feel, frustratingly, that the Russians have the same intelligence picture because many of the technologies that we have, the Russians also have, and there is frustration here that the Russians have not tried to debunk some of the conspiracy theories that have been doing the rounds.
Now, will that intelligence be passed on to whatever official inquiry is conducted into this crash?
Well, that's not certain, if I'm being honest. I sense a nervousness in Whitehall about Western intelligence agencies compiling a dossier to which they can hit Mr. Putin over the head with. What they want is the OSCE to compile its own evidence. Whether or not intelligence is provided to the OSCE is not yet clear.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick. Well, here with me now is the chair of the Defence Select Committee, Rory Stewart. We'll come on to that nervousness around dealing with Vladimir Putin in a moment that Nick refers to. But first of all, you know, we have Alexander Borodai saying absolutely no tampering. We first had the Americans, and now we have GCHQ saying there was tampering by the looks of it in terms of intercepts. I mean, who do you believe?
I believe the Americans and GCHQ that this man Borodai is not credible. He's clearly associated with the Russian state. There have been so many lies.
He's the Prime Minister, he's just not in a trench.
He's a Prime Minister of a non-existent state. I mean, this Donetsk People's Republic is like me proclaiming myself Prime Minister of Penrith.
We sent a signal to Vladimir Putin that after Crimea, that he can act in eastern Ukraine with impunity. Do you think that's right or not?
I think there's been a failure since 2008, since Georgia, since cyber attacks in Estonia in 2007. It's the same Putin. He's been behaving in this way, whether doing cyber attacks, using irregular warfare, destabilizing regimes, and we've let him get away with it.
But David Cameron's got a problem, hasn't he? Because you can condemn European leaders for a failure to ramp up sanctions. You can, condemn the French for the warship deal they've made of Russia. But then Nick Hopkins said on Monday, revealed on Monday, that in fact licenses, many licenses are still in place which allow British firms to sell body armour and weapons, guns, to the Russians. Now, that is pure hypocrisy.
I think we need to be very careful, particularly this stuff about the British and the French and Americans attacking each other in this way. Putin basically perceives the West as weak and decadent. He believes we don't have the will to confront him. He's going to hope that we're going to wish it'll all go away. This is very, very unedifying, people attacking each other in that way.
But do we have to be more robust? And if we have to be more robust, what form should that take?
Well, we have a Defence Committee report, which will be coming out next week, where we're going to specify what we think should be done militarily.
What?
And that's coming out next week.
Well, give us some kind of heads up on it.
Well, essentially, we need to be prepared to defend the Baltic states, where we have an Article 5 protection, but we also need to work out what our attitude is towards a country like Ukraine.
Well, let's just be quite clear, because the Baltics is a particularly difficult area. You know, NATO, the umbrella of NATO, if there was any build-up of Russian troops, do you think we would have to be prepared to go into the Baltics militarily if we had to?
We're signed up under Article 5 of the NATO alliance to say an armed attack on one is an attack on all. And the issue we're dealing with in our report is that Putin is brilliant at doing attacks which don't look like armed attacks. So he can use green men, he can use cyber warfare, he can use psychological
So do you think that then that there has to be, in terms of your report, some kind of preemptive build-up?
That is what you'll have to wait for the report to see.
But is it likely to happen?
We believe, and we'll...
No, in the report, what do you think? Do you think we need a preemptive build-up in the Balkans? Sorry, in the Baltic.
In the
Balkans too at this moment.
In the details report, we're going to lay out what we believe are more military measures that need to be made.
But you've heard, but do you actually believe, do you actually believe we need to put warning troops into the Baltic states? Because, I've been in the Baltic states, I know they're very worried.
So, speaking personally, not as the chair of the Defence Committee, yes, I believe we need to do much more, but specifically what we need to do, that's coming next week.
Now, let's turn away from that for a moment, because you'll have heard the head of the Met saying that actually the biggest threat to us here in Britain is not, he didn't say not from Vladimir Putin, but what he did say was returning ISIS operatives from Syria, making Britain insecure. So, what do we do with this here? What do you think the biggest threat to Britain actually is?
From my point of view, I think the biggest threat is a country like Eastern Ukraine. There you have Putin encouraging instability, ungoverned space, and it's ungoverned space with surface-to-air missiles that can take down planes at 33,000 feet. We haven't seen that in Syria, we haven't seen that in Iraq, we haven't seen that in Afghanistan. I would be very, very worried about Putin at the moment.
Roy Stewart, thank you so much. Well, let's deal with ISIS now. Zara and Salma Halain, 16-year-old twins from Manchester, hit the headlines at the start of the month when it was announced they'd apparently left their family home to join the Islamic State of Syria and Iraq, or ISIS. According to some reports, they were following the footsteps of an older brother already fighting in Syria. Their father has travelled to the region to try to bring them back to the UK, but we've had no news of them